It's my privilege and high honor, Howard Morton here, to speak to a returning pastor, Pastor Richard Kaeske. The occasion is actually a celebration of our 135th slant line, 136th anniversary. The church was founded in 1853, and the committee has been bringing back all the past living pastors. And of course, Richard Kaeske was, I guess, one of our younger pastors, in that, as I recall, he was actually a student when he first started at Immanuel. What year was that? Do you recall approximately?
1964.
1964?
June 64 I started here.
And how long were you here, Pastor?
Till 1970. I believe it was November 70 that I left.
I see. As I recall, you were actually a student down at, was it the University of Chicago or the Chicago Theological Seminary?
It was the University of Chicago Divinity School.
I see.
And, that's where I was a student for 2 years. And the third year, you were required to serve 1 full calendar year of internship in a parish of your choice.
Yeah.
And I went to the office of the Illinois Synod, which at that time was at 327 South LaSalle Street. And as I walked down the hallway, a gentleman called out to me, "May I help you?" That gentleman turned out to be Eric Gustafson. And I said, who was an assistant to President Bob Marshall. And I said, "I'm a student who is looking for a church to serve a year of internship. I'm attending the University of Chicago Divinity School. And Joe Sidler sent me here." And so he said, "I know just the place for you. Have a seat." And he connected me with Immanuel, and that's how I came here.
That's tremendous, because Pastor Gustafson was one of the, I guess, most prominent of our pastors in recent history. I think he was here from 1950 to 1960. And of course, Joe Sidler was a famous theologian down at the Theological Seminary. So you were recommended by good people. And we were really fortunate to get you. That was wonderful. Now, you then started more or less as an intern, but then after a brief period of time, you became like an assistant pastor, or you became at a higher level. Were you not? It seems to me, I used to consider you a pastor, so I imagine that's true, isn't it? Or...
Thank you. Yes, I served my year of internship, then returned to the seminary for a year. However, we made an arrangement whereby I would become the assistant to the pastor. I was still a layman at the time.
See.
So from 65 to 66, while I finished my education at the University of Chicago Divinity School, I served here as assistant to Pastor Charles Curtis.
Right.
Who also had attended the University of Chicago Divinity School. So this was most fortunate. And Bob Marshall, the Synod president, had also attended the University of Chicago Divinity School. They all had quit just before their PhD dissertation was due. So, and then they became involved in parish duties and marriage and children, and just there wasn't the time anymore to finish. So I met people that knew where I came from and were supportive of it. Because there was a stereotype around that if you went to the University of Chicago, you were pink. Remember, this was the 60s.
Yes,
McCarthy wasn't gone that long. And so I was expected to be kind of a left-wing radical with a lot of Marxist liberation theology in my veins. And it was surprising that I had such a warm welcome here at Immanuel. But then after I had served this year from 65 to 66 as assistant to the pastor, I was called as assistant pastor in 1966 and served as such until 1970. And that is how I evolved.
Okay, I have 2 questions then. Did you ever receive your PhD?
Yes, I did.
You are a legitimate PhD then, a doctor.
Yes, I received my PhD in theology from the University of Chicago Divinity School in 1971. Now that was after I had left here.
I see, very good.
I was ordained in the Holy Ministry in 1966, May 25th. I remember the date, at Rockefeller Chapel on the campus of the University of Chicago with Joe Sittler and Bishop Bob Marshall and Dr. Conrad Bergendorf.
Wonderful people,
who all laid their hands on me, and Philip Nelson, then Secretary of the Synod,
yes.
right? And Dr. Conrad Bergendorf was the Secretary for Theological Education in the LCA at that time, and he had to approve me for ordination because I went to a non-Lutheran seminary, the University of Chicago.
Well, you certainly started your ministry with excellent credentials. In a sense, you don't belong to the old school. That is, you weren't a member of Augustana Seminary or Maywood Seminary or the Chicago Theological School, but you came in sort of through the back door. In other words, you went through the Chicago Divinity School and then received special accreditation at our seminary, is that right?
Right,
Oh,
yeah. I
wonderful.
had to go to Maywood to take the exams with the other people who were to be ordained.
I see.
I could have gone, if I had known what I know now, I would have gone to Rock Island and take my exam there at Augustana Seminary, because that really came to be my home in the church. Immanuel was an Augustana church. From Immanuel, I went to St. Paul's on Ohio and Lawler in the Austin neighborhood on the west side of Chicago. That was a Swedish church,
Surely.
and so I stayed with the Swedes.
How long were you at St. Paul's, Pastor?
I was at St. Paul's on Ohio Street from 1970 to 77.
I remember I attended a district meeting there or something like that, and I was so surprised to see you there as the pastor. And I can also remember the narrow streets that were there and how hard it was to park around that church. But that was a church in transition, was it not? Wasn't that neighborhood changing?
Yes,
Did you find that challenging?
that was a big challenge. I came to St. Paul's on Ohio Street, which was located 9 blocks east of the Oak Park city limits. And that neighborhood at that time was a working class neighborhood, white, almost exclusively. 2 years later, it changed to 90% black within the space of a year.
Right.
It was such a rapid turnover that I just was flabbergasted. It was like a wave. I looked out the door of the parsonage I lived next door, down Ohio Street, and I could see for blocks at least 10 for sale signs on the front lawns. These were mostly homes and 2 flats in that neighborhood. 10 for sale signs per block. And the panic peddler had a field day. They said, do you know that pretty soon we won't be taking any homes anymore in this neighborhood because what's left won't qualify for a commercial loan, and you'll have to sell through the government, and then you're in trouble because you know all the red tape. I'm offering you as a favor a last opportunity to buy your home at half price. And that's how the panic peddlers turn over the neighborhood very quickly.
I remember there was a lady, I think she was of Italian heritage, who became very famous in Chicago at that time because she fought the panic peddlers, Mrs. Cicada or something. Do you remember that name?
Mrs. Cicada and the Organization for Better Austin were very strong in fighting this tactic, and eventually laws were passed to prohibit this.
That's right.
Panic peddling.
And the realtors who redlined and did this sort of thing faced severe penalties because of that. And then you moved on to Evanston, to St. Paul's.
Right. Well, let me finish the story on Ohio Street.
Oh, yes.
Because I've emphasized the big change.
Yes.
The church changed much more slowly. a lot of the members left, moved out of the neighborhood, or were afraid to come back in, but quite a few still stayed. I would say that we had probably 300 or 400 of the old-time white members who stayed for years while I was there. I stayed 5 years after the change. We received many of the new black members that came in. And when I left, I believe I must have done 100 baptisms in those 5 years. Mostly baptizing Baptists.
Yes.
Who had not been baptized, ironically. And we had 65 confirmed black members, most of them young people, which was a rejuvenation of the church. And it was an exciting and very energy-consuming type of ministry to try to keep the old-time Swedish members happy and supportive of the change.
Right.
I remember the first year we had our first black Santa Lucia queen. And I said, now remember, this is just a Swede with a sunburn.
That's right.
And that's how we had our Santa Lucia pageant all those years. Just kept going.
Well, I imagine I call it the high church. I mean, Synod headquarters would love to see more of that today. Now we've established quota systems within the church and so forth. And somehow it seems to me as a layman that we really don't know how to deal with these new people. For instance, we've been looking in Immanuel to try and bring in Hispanics and to bring in blacks. And yet, I guess our neighborhood has not gone through the tremendous change yet that you had in Austin. And we're trying to find out that, does our service appeal to these other people? Is it too high church? Is it too much liturgy? What do you feel about that? Do you think the Lutheran Church can accommodate this move? Or should we make changes? I know you were not really prepared for this question.
Yeah,
but
no, I'll be glad to answer that because I have my own views on this. I think that the Lutheran Church in a changing community, it's partially black, especially is an alternative for those blacks who do not want the noisy Baptist service, the noisy Pentecostal service. They like the orderliness, the accountability as far as money is concerned, and they like the educational emphasis that the Lutheran Church has in terms of Sunday school, confirmation, adult education, Bible study, and that is what some blacks will value. And they will join the Lutheran Church as an alternative to the predominant black churches that emphasize emotion, a lot of noise, and a lot of confusion. To my mind, at least, confusion in the service. So there is a place for the Lutheran Church and churches like it, liturgical church. They welcome the orderliness, the beauty of it, and treasure it. Now, it's nice when you can work in some hymns from the black tradition to give the people a feeling that their contribution is recognized within the context of the setting, but not as a substitute for the liturgy.
I think that's great. I think what you have said just now has really enlightened me, and somehow I wish this message could go out to other Lutheran churches. I do think like the slight changes you suggest in the music would really help bring these people into the congregations.
Right. Now let me add one item to here, and that is, it is so important to establish a theology of mission or an attitude towards the new people in terms of the mission of the congregation. The book that has helped me most on Ohio Street was a book by Phil Johnson, formerly pastor at Salem Lutheran Church on the South Side, which is the biggest and most successful black LCA Augustana congregation in the city. And Phil Johnson wrote a little book called Call Me Neighbor, Call Me Friend. And that title exemplified the attitude of his congregation and himself in reaching out to the community in a spirit of openness and friendliness and say, welcome to the neighborhood. We're your old neighbors. You are our new neighbors. Come and see what we have to offer. Maybe some of you will like what we have.
Boy,
That attitude of openness and friendliness enabled Salem to receive large numbers of black people into its community, and they are, as I said, the largest and most successful, at least they were until recently, black church that we have in the city of Chicago.
well, I'm certainly going to recommend that we at Immanuel read that book and study it at some of our forums, because I think it's essential that we get to learn a little bit more about how to evangelize and how to reach out to people. But boy, this is going faster than I thought it was going. You know, I can't help but ask you to go back in history just a little bit further to your origins, because I know you were not born in the United States, but that you were born in Germany.
Right.
Where were you born in Germany?
I was born in a suburb of Berlin called Babelsberg, which a year after I was born was incorporated into another suburb called Potsdam. So it became Potsdam-Babelsberg. That's where I was born, and lived probably half of my young life. The other half I lived in what later became the American sector of West Berlin. And it is in the American sector of West Berlin that I completed my grade school and my high school education. And after that, I came to the United States as an immigrant. I came to St. Louis Park, a suburb of Minneapolis, lived there for 3 years. I got to know and love Reuben Youngdahl and Mount Olivet Lutheran Church in Minneapolis. And then from there, I moved west to Billings, Montana, where I went to Rocky Mountain College. Graduated from there with the desire to go to the University of Chicago Divinity School, because they had the big name theologians there. Paul Tillich, Joseph Sittler, Gerald Brouwer, and later Martin Marty. And these were the people I was interested in. So that's how I came to Chicago, 1962.
And at what point in your life did you make the decision that you wanted to go into the ministry? Was that when you were at Rocky Mountain College, or was that prior to that?
No, I entered Rocky Mountain College as an engineering student. But as a sophomore, I felt a very strong call from God to enter the ordained ministry, and at least to prepare for it. And that's what I did then. And I came to Immanuel really to test out, is this really God's will for me? And to take that year to say, God, give me a sign that I cannot deny, that I must serve you in the ministry. And I received that here at Immanuel. That's the crucial experience to me at Immanuel. It confirmed the call.
Repeat that again, so that we can all remember this. You received your call here at Immanuel. The confirmation.
The confirmation of my call came during my year of internship and the subsequent years, but especially during the year of internship here at Immanuel. I sensed that God had called me. And I confirmed that and asked God to remove my doubts. And the gracious people at Immanuel helped God to confirm this.
Well, I feel
this is a special place for me, a holy place, if you will.
I hope you mention that in your sermon today.
Well,
I really hope you do, because I think we need that. I really. Can you work it in?
Well, we'll try.
Are we about through, or we have a few? Okay, a few more minutes. Okay. Were you old enough to remember World War II at all when you were in Berlin, or?
Yes, I remember World War II primarily as a time of fear. Mm-hmm. The bombings that we experienced in Berlin during the closing year and a half of the war is what I remember most vividly. The air raid sirens, running to the bomb shelters, coming back out, seeing this house destroyed, that apartment building on fire, and those people killed. And this went on day and night. The British bombed us at night, and the Americans bombed us during the day. And then when they were done, the Russians came with their big artillery and shelled Berlin. But the interesting part was that the people we were most afraid of, our family and I, was the Gestapo. because the Gestapo would come at night and haul whole families away, and they would disappear, vanish. No corpses would be left even. So that was the most terrifying reality, was the Gestapo. So we said, well, the lesser of two evils are the Russians. So may the Lord speed them on. And they are the ones to come.
Now I am about to ask a question I had a fear to ask you, and that is, how did your family survive the war? How about your mother? And I don't know, did you have a father and brothers and sisters?
Right. My mother and father survived. I have a younger brother, 5 years younger than I am. I have a sister, 3 years younger than I am. They all survived. By the grace of God. We moved out of Berlin when the bombings got too bad to Babelsberg again, where we had a house and where the bombings were less severe and you could survive better. But they were hard times, hunger, need, fear.
And after the war, that continued also, did it not?
Continued on. The Russians had occupied that part. We were 2 blocks away from the American sector, but in the Russian zone. And in the Russian zone there, at first, was no food. The food was taken primarily for feeding the Russian troops, who didn't have anything to eat either. There was a program of ferreting out Nazis that was carried on very zealously, and so there was a lot of fear and uncertainty.
I know I should have asked your lovely wife perhaps a similar question. I believe you were born in Germany too, were you? Were you born in near Berlin? Kaeske, about your family. They're in East Germany. Have you had the opportunity to see them since you came to this country?
No, we all, the Russians caught up with us. We lived 1 year under the Russians. That is my mother, and there were 4 children. I was the oldest of 4. My dad at that time was missing. Didn't know where he was. So after a dreadful experience living under the Russians for a year, my mother said we just have to, try to get to the West. And so we kind of fled and lived in West Germany, and later on we found out that my father was in a Russian prison camp in Moscow. And after 3 years he finally was released, very ill. And and then in West Germany we were treated like refugees. So my mother again was a force behind, said, let's find a new home, let's go to America. And we waited 5 years till our quota came up, and then came as a whole family, my father, mother, and in the meantime in West Germany, my twin sisters were born, so there were 6 children over to America.
Wonderful. And how about you, Pastor? Have you seen your family since you came to this country? I understand they're still in Germany.
Right. Yeah, my father died before I came back to Germany. He died in East Germany. I was not able to go there after he had died. I saw my mother years later when I returned to Germany. I have a brother and a sister living north of Hamburg, Germany, that are still there. And I get to see them once every 3 to 5 years.
Oh, it's wonderful. Both of you have such a background of stress, I guess you might say, and strain, and you have undergone so much. I mean, living here all alone, Pastor, and getting your education and so forth. I can't help but feel this has, in some manner, helped you become a better pastor. That probably isn't the best term to use, but certainly you must understand compassion and have a feeling for the suffering that some of your parishioners might be going through. And I can tell you it's been just a wonderful occasion being able to see you again and speak to you and your wife and have you here at Immanuel. And you are welcome here anytime to come back and visit. And it's really a privilege. And when I said at the beginning, I should have if I didn't, it's been a privilege and a high honor to interview you.
Thank you. It's been a joy seeing a dear old friend like you being the interviewer, and a cameraman being a young man when I was here. And seeing him now in the prime of life, it's good to be among friends.
I only wish that Liz could afford to buy him a razor.
All right.
Then we could see really what he looks like, you know? He looks handsome now, but
Very handsome.
do you think he really is that way underneath all that?
I think so. I think so. This is a sort of, a touch of Jesus. This is how we picture Jesus.
That's true.
Remember, and so this is his following Jesus in his hairstyle and his beard.
Never really thought of him as being that saintly, but maybe you're right.
He is one of the Jesus people,
Right,
following him from afar.
right.
Somebody's on the inside that counts, right?
Right. There we go. I'm grateful to be here and rejoice with the people of Immanuel on this anniversary occasion. Pray and hope there'll be many good years in the future of this church.
Thank you. We are neighboring parishes, right?
Yes. We're just a couple of miles north of here in Evanston. I'm now serving at St. Paul's in Evanston.
Right.
Since 1977, and it's about a 15-20 minute ride down Ridge Avenue.
That's true. True. And that is also an Augustine, an old Augustine?
No, that's the ULC
That was
parish,
ULC.
the United Lutheran Church parish. So, but now we're all together,
That's right.
LCA and AL.
And you feel that they are good people too, right?
Yes, they are. We have a good number of Swedes
well,
and even some Norwegians. Good enough.
Okay. Well, I think that concludes our interview then, Steve, unless you have something to add from back of the cameras.